Great, welcome everyone. We're going to get started here in just a minute. Make sure everything is streaming properly. Perfect. Looks like everything is ready. Well, hello everyone. My name is Eva Lark. I'm the Senior Manager of Public Programs for the Seabird Institute in Hog Island Audubon Camp. Welcome to our Making Bird Connections lecture series, where we bring a bird-focused presentation to you every month. These presentations are free, but donations are encouraged to help fund our programs. This month, we're fundraising to commission an artist to paint a mural in Midcoast, Maine, where we're located, to highlight threatened seabird species. There'll be a link in the chat box or the comment section down below to help fund this project. No donation is too small. Now tonight, we're proud to have Katherine Hamilton as our guest speaker. Katherine has been a professional artist for over 25 years. She's spent quite a bit of time traveling as a birder and a guide. At Hog Island, she's been an instructor for our field ornithology camp session for the past few years. And she believes that anyone can gain insight and greater understanding of the world around them through field sketching and observation, spoken like a true artist. I'm very proud to have you here tonight. Thank you so much, Katherine, for joining us to talk about birds and art and conservation and how they all intermingle.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to cut my intro short because I did the most unprofessional thing imaginable. And I took 4 hour-long lectures and decided to put them into one half-an-hour presentation. So we'll see if I can pull this off. I'm going to go right to sharing screen, share. There you guys have me, and let me press play and we will get started. There we go. So very, very sort of dramatic conservation through an artist's eyes. So I had decided a long time ago that I was very interested in conservation, but my ability as an artist full-time for, gosh, a lot longer than my profile things say now, is not always in the highest of contribution levels. So I found other ways to work out various ways of working with organizations and with corporate sponsorship to travel and to see birds, but also to give back and to try to find ways in which I could contribute, basically. I was really lucky in March of 2016. This is not a corporate journey. This one was from the Maui Forest Bird Recovery Project. And I was really lucky to be able to partner with them and with the then Zuganruye birding tours to go on a 3-week trip to all of the major islands in Hawaii and to try to find all of the endemic species that were there possible and to record them and to actually help as a volunteer. The first thing I did was to hike up into the Alakai Wilderness Preserve off of public lands to shadow, but also help out with the Maui Forest Bird Recovery Project on Kauai. This is a difficult hike. It's not on the main trails. It's a, we were carrying in everything. It's a hike that goes to a spot that everything is pack in and pack out. There are no amenities. And things like water, that's actually me, and I want that in there as a record. In order to get water, we would have to take these 10, 20-gallon jugs and go climb down and go find water and bring it back up to the camp. Everything was designed we did minimally invasive camping while doing research. And the forests and the plant life in there were some of the most amazing things I've ever seen. The ohia trees, the koa trees, all of the things that make the endemic honey creepers of Hawaii what they are all still beautifully preserved up at high elevations in Kauai and in many places in Hawaii. Now, I think most of us probably know the situation with endemic species in Hawaii is quite dire. And so groups like the Maui Forest Bird Recovery Project are working very hard to ensure that the native plant populations are still going to reduce predators like rats, mongooses, and feral cats, all of which are doing just a real number on native bird species. And in addition to which, pigs, feral pigs are another, they tear up habitat like nobody's business. So I went up to help and also to stay out of the way of akeke nest monitoring. And we were really lucky and we found them. This is one of the rarest birds in Hawaii. That's me sitting under a tripod to minimize, minimize my impact. And I'm watching an akeke build a nest and go and steal nesting material from other nests. And it was, it's hard to put it into words, one of the most amazing experiences of my life by far. Seeing these birds was an incredible opportunity as a birder, but also too, just to be able to observe, how they actually interacted, what they were doing. The numbers of the KKA are seriously, they're in a lot of trouble. I think there are around 1,000 birds left, and that's it. So this is one of the rarest birds in Hawaii. I was lucky to be here. Callie, who is Lisa Crampton, who is the director, and Kayla Lee was our team manager at that point, and she knew a lot about botany, so I did a lot of, like I said, plant searching as well. I'm not sketching here. I wasn't making drawings at this point because I was actually there to volunteer to help them, not to help me per se. And so I was actually just helping them with the field research. And also my job at that point was to look at the nest and actually see exactly how many times they went in and out of the nest. But I did get a chance to make quick sketches in other areas in the Alakai as we were looking. This is a puaohi. That's a thrush. It's also quite endangered, like most of these birds are. We hiked down into ravines for this and followed stream waterways until we found a likely nest, and then there was a bird in it. And I think we weren't 100% sure that there would be a bird in it, but there was a bird there. And so I sat back, quite a distance, and did actually get to do some very, very simple and very rapid field sketching. So that's one bird that I did get a chance to draw. Akikikis, which are probably one of the most charming and cutest Kauai birds. They're little gray. They almost move around like nuthatches. Is another bird that I had a chance to study, take photographs of, and do some sketches of. These are just really quick field type sketches and notes. I think in the last one, yeah, also I did not die on this hike, which was a small miracle. I was by far the oldest person doing any of these crazy hikes, and I was really proud of myself for having survived it. On this same trip, this was a 3-week trip, we also island hopped down through the major chain, and we went to Oahu, and to see the translocation projects for the Laysan albatrosses. I met Robbie Coley there from the Pacific Rim Conservation Group, and they are doing pretty incredible work with a number of species now, not just Laysan albatrosses, but in terms of setting up colonies that are from extirpated areas or where there weren't colonies, attracting birds, and then raising chicks by hand, feeding them from the eggs all the way through, and then ultimately bringing them back out to places where there are established colonies, and then also starting new colonies. So this is on Oahu. I think this is Kainea. Yeah, Kainea Point, Point, where we hiked out on the edge of Oahu to go see albatrosses. And I got a chance to sketch a little bit there as well. So this was fun. I got to draw a little bit. This was not a trip. We also had tour participants on the remainder of the trip outside of the Kauai portion that was up in the private areas. So my job was mostly as a tour leader, but it was over the course of these 3 weeks that I decided I really thought we could use this as a way to write articles, to do public presentations, and even hold exhibits that might be able to sort of bring focus to certain projects. This is the Wakamoi Preserve with the Nature Conservancy, where you can get special tours once a month. I think you can take a hike in. This was the site of my biggest dip where I did not see kiwikiu, which is Maui parrotbill. Unfortunately, I think that's the only endemic honey creeper from the major islands that I missed on this tour. So I'm still a little bit heartbroken about it. I have that's the closest I've gotten to one of those. Ala Ohio did pose for me, and I did get a chance, and we saw just about everything else on this trip. So this is on Maui. It's a nature conservancy program, and the hikes are just incredible through the forest. I would recommend it to anybody who thinks they're going to go try to look at birds in Hawaii. So in addition to that, I went to the Hakalau Forest, which is a national wildlife refuge, and that's on the Big Island. That's in Hawaii, you know, the island of Hawaii. And took photos and made some sketches, and then started making more finished drawings at the end of it. And this culminated in writing articles both for the Zeiss blog and a couple other places it was published in. And I just wrote a little bit about this sort of hotspot of extinction, but also incredible conservation efforts that were going on with all of these different sort of commingling and various funding sources. You know, there's the Nature Conservancy, there's the American Bird Conservancy, all of these people coming together. Jack Jeffrey is somebody who's been going up to the Hakalau Forest for over 50 years, and he's seen species go extinct. And so he was, I've gone up there twice with him now on 2 different trips. And I would just highly recommend him as a person to find, because his stories are incredible. So I put up some links of conservation organizations and 2 artists down at the bottom. Danya Weber is somebody who was on my team in Kauai. And I would say, I'm doing it like this. I can send these to anybody. I made a PDF of all of the links from the lecture if you're interested, but just take a screenshot if you think you might want to follow through on some of these links, and maybe Eva and I can figure out how to get you links later. For all of the major islands of Hawaii, these are some really good places to look up. Danya Weber is an artist. She has made a pamphlet of all of the native plants that you're likely to see on Kauai. It's a wonderful thing to go look up, and she has lots of neat things in her store. And then Lori Sumie is another person that I met who's another artist. She's an artist and a filmmaker, and just both wonderful people to go look up. I think you have enough time to screenshot that if you're interested. So how does this tie into the larger picture? I went on a really neat 3-week tour. I decided I wanted to spend my life doing something like this. And I'm very lucky to be involved with Zeiss Sports Optics, and they are also very conservation minded, and they have the ability to do corporate level funding. And so as their ambassador, I go around and I talk about these projects, and I give lectures on each of the individual things I'm showing today, and do my best to spread the word about individual projects, but also we ensure that corporate money goes directly to those projects. So if Zeiss is sponsoring a tour, that means money from Zeiss goes directly to that tour. Another way we do it is through public exhibitions. I've had 2 to 3 British Bird Fair exhibitions where I mean, the number of people that would come through a British Bird Fair was, you know, would number like 30,000. We had a lot of people come through. So we would give talks and demonstrations on what we were talking about. There's Hawaii birds in here, there's California birds, there's California condors, there's the alalas, the Hawaiian crow, all kinds of amazing birds in an exhibit space that's very public. And then I would give lectures in that as well. And so without that kind of money to back you up, it's really hard to do projects like this, where I headed to Morocco with Zeiss and BirdLife International, joint venture that Jim Lawrence partly cooked up. And we went to go see northern Baldivises, and let's see if this works. I'm going to take us out to a video. And the first thing I'm going to do is try to turn the sound on, because for some reason it comes up automatically muted. And then I'm not playing this whole thing, but this is the type of project I was doing with them.
I'm Katherine Hamilton, an artist and a keen birder.
Yeah, well,
as a Zeiss ambassador.
All right, I'm going to click it off there because this is not about me. It's actually about the project. So let's get us back to this. So yeah, so I went and climbed cliffs with GREPOM and SAO, which is the Moroccan and the Spanish BirdLife International chapters, you know, partners. BirdLife International has a really neat paradigm where instead of being an immense umbrella organization that sort of colonial goes out, they establish bird lives in local habitats and in local hotspots that are in need of conservation, and they work from the ground up, and everybody there is hired from there. And it creates a really good conservation model because locals are involved. And I got to, for the first time, actually do a lot of sketching on site because that was my job, as opposed to being somebody who was helping or somebody who was leading a tour and trying to find, you know, because when I start drawing, I actually really just want to draw. It's not really my problem if they don't see the Baldivis, right? So I really like spending time drawing, and this was an amazing opportunity. These are just sketchbook pages that I actually did all in the rain. It poured on us for the entire 3 days of filming while we were there, and I was sketching the colonies. And these are very, very loose sketches. It's really how I like to work in the field. And then I'll make longer drawings, other sketches. And then ultimately some finished drawings that were used for publicity. This is a watercolor of northern Baldivises. The northern Baldivis is one of the rarest birds in the world, as the video says. I would heartily recommend looking them up. They're fascinating, a very, very long history. I could go into it for an hour on its own, but I know I'm going to run out of time already, so I'm not going to. But the reason why we were there is because in 2017, for the first time, an offshoot colony, as the result of conservation efforts working, a wild offshoot colony was discovered where they had gone and started breeding on their own. And it was such good news. And so Zeiss decided to sponsor this species, sponsor GREPON, and get some money and optics directly to the ground, directly to the people that really needed it, so that they could help the birds. The wardens there spend their time on cliffs watching and making sure that the birds aren't poached. These are people from the local towns. We're talking about, this is Morocco on the Atlantic coast, and in the Souss Massa National Park mostly, and then in areas. So I did an ink drawing from that. And then from that ink drawing, Zeiss made t-shirts. And so these t-shirts were sold all around the world for a while to bring money directly to the Northern Baldivis Project. And since this is one of my favorite, weirdest birds on the planet, it was just an honor to be able to be involved in any kind of small way. And the biggest thing about all of this is every time I do one of these trips, I meet the people that are actually working hard and working on the ground. Unfortunately, Abdallah left us last year and we lost him. And so I wanted to include a photo of him. He was one of the wardens that would camp out overnight and watch over the Baldivises to make sure that they had a future there in Morocco. And Jorge on the left was an instant friend that I met. He worked with SAO, which is the BirdLife partner in Spain. And he was our translator because he was fluent in all of the languages, and just an all-around wonderful person. He's an ornithologist, a biologist. And I just want to emphasize that on every single one of these projects, I was really working closely with people who were really working with the birds. It was sort of funny to, you know, to sort of catalog it on social media. It looks a lot less involved than it actually was. This was an incredible, incredible project. So in 2017 and 2018, I got to go to Nagaland, India, to go view the Amur falcon migration spectacle, which is one of the most insane spectacles in the world. News of the Amur falcons started surfacing in 2012. Prior to 2011, Nagaland wasn't even accessible for most Westerners, other than by really, really special travel permits. But in 2012, we started hearing about these falcons that were concentrating at a dam lake in Nagaland, and were concentrating by the hundreds of thousands. And at the same time, they were being hunted out by the local villages at a rate of up to 140,000 birds per year, which is an incredible number. Now, I do a really long, involved presentation on this and the cultural reasons for what's going on. They have a long history of hunting, and they also thought that the birds were a gift from God. And by that, I mean a Christian God, because most of the Naga people, like 88% and over, are Christian, and most of those are Baptist. They were actually converted by German missionaries before, in the mid 1800s. And so they have had a very unique view of what these birds that suddenly appeared. They thought it was manna from heaven, according to their beliefs. And so they thought they were supposed to hunt them. But in any case, the concentration of birds was phenomenal. And then also, the birds are beautiful. These are Amur falcons. They're a little bit like, they're longer than American kestrels, or say like a merlin, but they're about the same weight as a merlin. So these birds migrate from Upper Mongolia all the way down through to the southern tip of Africa. And they have the longest over water migration of any raptor. I mean, it's astonishing how far they migrate, and I would like to go into it a lot more, but I'm going to try to keep it short. They're unbelievable long distance migrants. They were being hunted out, and we went to go see them. And I journaled it as we went along through the lowlands of India. This is Assam. Nagaland was made a state about 1963. It was not an easy journey. The trade winds were late and the monsoons were late, and we had roads that washed out on us. It was a little bit hairy at times. They built this road in front of our eyes over 2 hours, and then we drove across it. That's all I'm going to say. I made it. And we made it to the Doyang Reservoir, which was beautiful, but weirdly, there were no birds. And we thought maybe we had a 4-day window to try to see the concentration of birds, and we had timed it very carefully. I was there with Scott Weidensaul, Kevin Laughlin from Wildside Nature Tours, and Peter Trueblood and Bruce Evans. And the four of us were very nervous at this point, but the next morning we saw this. Every single one of those birds is an Amur falcon. And this is pre-dawn. And I had actually said we'd been looking and we couldn't see with our naked eyes for quite a while. And I had said, oh my gosh, guys, put your bins up. And that is what we saw. There's a second video. Every single bird, and that morning alone, I point counted 40 to 50,000 birds. So they really do congregate there. It's partly food, it's water, it's on their path already. This is worth waiting for, because this was pretty cool. It's the largest concentration of a single species anywhere on Earth for migrating raptors. I mean, it's just astonishing. So we had 4 days of this. Very, very fortunate. And just to give, because I can't go into the whole conservation thing, I have a minute-long thing here that I will share with you. This was made by Bruce at the end of our trip. These are not stock images, by the way. This is all what we saw. Okay, jump back to this quickly. So I am a firm believer in science. I am a firm believer in ecotourism. This is Scott sketching. He was taking notes. I was drawing Scott. I'm not 100% sure he knows. This is Scott Weinstall. I'm not 100% sure he knows that this drawing exists. We'll wait for another day to let him know that it does. So I took photos. I spoke extensively with Banu Haralu, who was one of the people who made it known that the Pangti village people were willing and wanted to try to conserve the birds rather than hunt them. She went and spoke to them directly. She is Naga by birth, but was essentially like a CNN type reporter in India and a very well-known person and a wonderful, wonderful conservationist. This is just a little bit of background on the timing. I'm going to blow through this. This is Nchomo, who had formerly been a hunter, who turned into a conservationist and a bird leader, an unbelievably good spotter of birds. Just a little bit of cultural scenes that I'm also going to fly through, I apologize. And the elders who also approved and voted to decide to conserve these beautiful birds rather than hunt them, and decided to believe in ecotourism as a way to do this. And again, these went on to t-shirts, and I've been giving this much longer version of this Nagaland talk for years now, since 2018. Links if you want to do a screenshot. And finally, just to wrap up, my last trip that I have not written an article about yet. I've published all of these other things in multiple other sources, but we went to Uganda in 2021 in the fall, and right in that space between, we thought everything was over and Omicron surged. And so we had no problems with COVID during the time that we traveled, but everything kind of exploded on the end of it for both countries. I went to Uganda to look into ecotourism there, to learn more about the birding in Uganda is phenomenal. It's very much known for mountain gorilla explorations. And these are just some drawings that I had made and am making now as I start to write about my experience there. It's a country that's coming up on ecotourism in a way that, you know, say Kenya or Tanzania have already sort of established in ways that Uganda has everything to offer that those countries do. They just hadn't done it. Herbert Bayaruhanga has just kickstarted amazing both conservation efforts, ecotourism efforts. Oh gosh, how I love weavers. Phenomenal. How am I doing on time? Oh, it's time. I'm almost done, Eva. I'm going to make it in a minute. Papyrus gonalex, a very, very rare and tasty bird for bird watchers all over the world. And here are some links. These are some things that I'll be writing about that will be upcoming. The African Birding Expo, which is a little bit like Bird Fair for Africa. Uganda Women Birders, which is an enormously successful group of birders that are getting trained as naturalists and field guides. And I believe 2023, look for a women's symposium in Uganda of naturalists. Ride for a Woman is an amazing, you should just go look it up. It's a lodge and a community-based arts and crafts co-op that is based at Bwindi, where you can go see gorillas and a gazillion forest birds. And I did it in a half an hour almost. So there's a lot more to a lot of it. I can answer questions, and I'm more than willing, if people want to email me, I can, you know, I should have put it into the presentation. And that's it. So I will stop share now, Eva, if I can find my cursor. There we go. Thank you. I'll check the chat now.
Yeah, thanks so much, Catherine. What a wonderful highlight of projects that you've worked on. We're going to bring in our next guest speaker tonight, our Audubon Connection speaker. But if anyone has questions for Catherine, feel free to drop those in the chat box or the comment section. We're going to do a live Q&A with both of our speakers after our next speaker, who is our Audubon Connection. Making Bird Connections lecture series is a way for us to highlight Hog Island Audubon instructors, but then connect it to larger Audubon initiatives that are happening. So I'm going to bring in our next speaker here. Perfect. So tonight, our Bird Connection speaker is the Vice President of Content at National Audubon Society. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Jennifer. Jennifer leads the editorial and arts team that distinguishes Audubon for its outstanding journalism on birds and conservation and sets the high visual standard and branding for the organization. She serves as the editor-in-chief of the quarterly Audubon magazine, and she works on many brand projects for Audubon, including the Audubon Photography Awards, Audubon for Kids, and the Audubon Mural project. Thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing how you can further make that connection between using art for bird conservation.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. Now let me try to share my screen so I can take you on a whirlwind tour. Let's see. Okay, how's that? Everyone see okay? Okay, so this, as Eva said, I'm Jennifer Bogo, the Vice President of Content for the National Audubon Society. I'm based at Audubon's headquarters in New York City, where spring migration has just begun. Millions of birds will soon pass through the city on their way to their breeding grounds. But this evening, I want to show you the ones that, thanks to the Audubon Mural project, are here year-round, perched on the walls of bodegas, barbershops, and other buildings. The Audubon Mural Project is a public art initiative produced by the National Audubon Society and Gittler and Gallery in New York City. Like Audubon, it's mission-driven. We hope through art to reach people on an emotional level and move them to action, to literally stop them in the streets and cause them to consider ideas in a new light. This beautiful mosaic is of trumpeter swans, and I'll come back to it later. It began, like so many things in birding and bird conservation, with a spark bird, a flamingo painted by the artist Boy Kong near the Gittler and Gallery in Harlem. And that one bird led to a bigger idea. Why paint just one bird, especially in John James Audubon's old neighborhood? After all, the famous avian artist, who had drawn so much attention to the beauty and diversity of North American bird species, had lived and was buried here in northern Manhattan. Why not paint many, many birds and use them to draw attention to an urgent issue, climate change? And so the Audubon Mural Project was born. Audubon had just released a birds and climate change report. Its scientists found that 2/3 of birds in North America may be threatened by climate change. Avi Gittler of the Gittler and Gallery and the National Audubon Society teamed up to enlist artists to paint those species throughout the Harlem and Washington Heights neighborhoods of New York City. The murals ranged from the very small, such as this mourning warbler, a little bird that may lose 90% of its breeding range in the northern United States and Canada at the current pace of warming. And that's the artist Tom Sanford up in a ladder painting it. To murals that are very, very large, like these evening and black-headed grosbeaks by the artist Louise Jones. Two birds that live in different areas of the country that are both projected to lose their forest habitat. It spans the entire side of a church. And soon the birds began to spread. They popped up on security gates all across the neighborhood, such as these quirky little burrowing owls from the artist Jana Liptek. And others perched on the sides of buildings. This red-breasted sapsucker and the American three-toed woodpecker, they're feeding their babies on the side of a pediatric office. Many murals were painted over a few hours or days directly onto the walls. Others, such as this greater sage grouse by the artist George Peruggi, was created over weeks or months and then installed on the site. A few artists took inspiration from the works of John James Audubon. The artist Lunar New Year followed the compositions of Audubon's swallow-tailed kite. Inside the bird of prey, he painted a flock of 12 other climate-threatened bird species. Also tucked in there is one bird that's certainly a cautionary tale for bird conservation, the passenger pigeon. This mural covers the west side of the Stella, a pioneering low-income housing building across the street from John James Audubon's gravesite in Trinity Cemetery. And this mural, called Endangered Harlem, which is a nod to the effects of gentrification on longtime residents of the neighborhood, portrays parallel patterns of both human and avian migration. You can see here images of the Second Great Migration on the wall. This is also one of just a couple of murals that worked in a portrait of Audubon himself. Of course, there's a very important conversation to be had, and that is happening now, about the legacy of John James Audubon with respect to charting a more inclusive future for bird conservation. One of the things I love most about the Audubon Mural Project is that most artists portray birds through the lens of their own life experience, bringing to their work a wide range of artistic styles and perspectives. And that's what makes the project so special. For example, Yumi Rodriguez is a young artist who lives near the barbershop where her grandfather worked. She attributes her deep love of nature to him, and he called her his little hummingbird. So she painted these rufous hummingbirds in honor of him. Mural project artists have come from around the world to create meaningful, but we also strive to create meaningful relationships with the community where the project lives. We collaborated with an organization called Creative Artworks on this mural, for which youth artists under the guidance of a teaching artist were paid for their artwork. The students created this concept. The pencil the bird is carrying represents knowledge, and it is being fed to them by the common red pole, which symbolizes their school teachers. And Carla Torres titled her mural, Here Comes the Sun, in tribute to both the tropical Parula, which nests in Torres's home country of Ecuador, and the people of her New York neighborhood where she lives now, many of whom immigrated from countries such as Ecuador, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and Mexico, as she says, sun-filled nations. Walking around the neighborhoods can feel like going on a scavenger hunt. One of my favorite juxtapositions of art and canvas is the gyrfalcon in the center, which is painted on an icebox, which is an apt nod to the bird's habitat. Only a handful of these birds ever come south of Canada in the winter. With polar regions warming faster than the rest of the planet, gyrfalcons, of course, face major changes in their habitat. It will squeeze them even farther north and make their prey that much harder to find. The Audubon Mural Project briefly paused during the pandemic, but then it came back with new poignancy. The zip codes where the mural project is located were among the hardest hit by the first wave of COVID-19. The Trumpeter Swan mural I showed briefly at the beginning was the first mural after lockdown and the project's first mosaic. I'm going to play a super short video clip for you of its installation.
Now we're here on 163rd and Broadway.
Not only do they make the neighborhood beautiful, but they also raise awareness and they teach people about the climate and the birds. And it also inspires them to take care of the community. It's a really beautiful effort.
Have people from the community put up a few pieces. They get to be a part of the piece.
So many details in here. These dominoes right here are reminiscent to the culture of the Dominican Republic, Washington Heights, Puerto Rico. They really speak to the community.
Precioso, está precioso. En la época que estamos, le levanta el ánimo a uno. Ending 2020 with a gift for New York City, something positive, something that is for everybody. That's what this is all about. AudubonMuralProject.org. Make sure you check it out. And now we're here.
So as it turns out, the side of the building where the Trumpeter Swan mosaic was installed was a wall that had been painted many times by a local graffiti artist named Totem. He went on to paint his own mural for the Audubon Mural Project. He's also an employee at New York Presbyterian Hospital and worked through the pandemic for the blood marrow transplant team. So he's pictured here in front of his mural in his scrubs. Jessica Mafia is another artist from the Washington Heights neighborhood. She connected with nature and birds during the pandemic and long walks through the city. She was inspired to create our first mural depicting birdsong rather than a bird itself. These sound clouds that you see on the right have spectrograms of the American robin. The absence of the bird itself, Jessica felt, was poignant. She also incorporated the hands of local environmental activists into her mural by casting them in concrete. We saw the loss of our first large-scale mural during the pandemic, a beautiful tricolored heron by Federico Masso, who also produces art under the name of Aina Cruz. The building changed hands and new management whitewashed the wall while doing repairs. Neighbors emailed us pretty much instantly, distressed at the loss of something so beautiful that had become part of the fabric of their lives, particularly during such a dark time. The artist's response is very thoughtful and I thought telling. His hope, he said, is that the bird won't be gone in real life, and that's what the mural was about, sending a message of preservation. Birds, like the murals, are not guaranteed a future. Losses like this become part of the project's message too. So far, as you can see from this map, we've painted 100 murals and 138 species of birds in New York City. One or two even hopped the East River to Queens, where these two black ducks hover above their natural habitat. And as the project has grown, we've sought new ways to engage people with the murals. This fall, we did the project's first running tour, a 5K art run, which was the fastest way to tour the murals yet. We've been particularly excited about two ways the project's mission has rippled out to reach new audiences. Teachers from elementary grades through college have incorporated the project into lessons to draw connections between birds and art and the science of climate change. The image on the left is from a public high school in Manhattan. A teacher had built a visual arts mixed media lesson around the Audubon mural project. And the project on the right is by a 5th grade class who created their own Audubon mural project in the halls of their school building. And people have also carried the concept to their own communities and incorporated their own meaningful touches and ideas. There's a beautiful Audubon mural project mural along a meadow in Vashon Island, Washington, spearheaded by Vashon Audubon, that incorporates a land acknowledgement. Sinisippi Audubon in Rockford, Illinois, peppered their city with a number of murals for a whole satellite project. They do regular walking tours, which is also something we do here in New York City in partnership with New York City Audubon. There's also a satellite project in France. Several more murals are in the works in other cities, including at some college campuses. We're excited to support these efforts, and so we created a toolkit to share insights from what we've learned here in the New York City project. Our hope is that the murals will prove to be a useful engagement tool for Audubon chapters and centers, a way to reach new audiences and start a conversation about local birds and the actions we must take to protect our shared future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful project to highlight. I hope everyone enjoyed all of the photos. I'm going to bring Katherine back in and we're going to get to our Q&A. So don't forget, if you have questions for Jennifer or Katherine, you can drop those down in the chat or comment section. We're going to get to as many as we can tonight before we wrap things up. So I do have a question for you, Jennifer, right off the bat. It's about the murals. How do you select the locations, or do the artists select the locations? How does that pairing happen?
Yeah, there's a little bit of magic to that. So we always, I wish I have a picture of this, which was in my slideshow, which is a wall in the neighborhood with all of the spaces like traced where you could potentially put a mural. And so Avi Gittler, who we partner with, is always walking through northern Manhattan, eyeballing walls and thinking like, oh, you could put a mural on that, or maybe that. There are certain landlords that have become friendly to the project that will offer their buildings to us. And sometimes either residents or people will reach out and say, hey, there's this amazing wall across the street from my building. Won't you put a mural there? And sometimes artists will also come to us and say they have a wall. So we try to kind of bring all those logistics together.
And then on a follow-up to that question, you spoke to how the artists themselves may select the species with something that resonates with them. But if they don't have a specific species, do you have a list or a kind of a wish list of species that you want to highlight?
Yes, unfortunately, the list of species we want to highlight is 389 birds long because it is the list of climate threatened birds in the Survival by Degrees report that Audubon produced. So we have a spreadsheet and we've been ticking those off throughout time. One way we do sometimes select birds is that people can sponsor murals. And so around the holidays, for example, a number of people reached out and sponsored murals. There's a way to do that via our website. And we try to match folks who are interested in selecting a species of bird with artists who may be open to painting something that someone else has suggested.
This question is for you, Katherine. Do you know how COVID-19 has, well, Jennifer was great where she, kind of related how COVID-19 has affected some of the communities where that artwork and the murals are located. Do you know if or what effects the pandemic has had on the work that's been going on in Nagaland or Uganda?
Everywhere. I mean, I don't want to be a downer about it, but it shut everything down. So any one of these travel projects, conservation projects that relied on ecotourism money was severely affected. And I have a couple of connections that are, the village of Pengti is on top of a peak and they have their own cellular network for each other. It's not like they're living in a different era, but they have very little communication with the outside. And when I went in 2017, I was actually the first Western woman to ever visit the village ever. So that is how isolated they are. So I have not heard from the people that I know on the ground there, but I do know Lansotang Lota, who is also Naga, has kept in touch and people are still there. The birds are still there, waiting for people to come back, like everybody, I think.
I did drop a link to the Survival by Degrees website so folks can check that out. I'm sure, Katherine, many of the species you've worked with and on sketching are unfortunately on that list or on similar list of threatened species. Do you have a species, Katherine, that you really want to see, like, one that you would love for someone to sponsor a project to go sketch and highlight?
So hard to pick one species. That's tough. I really, really want to go to Borneo, and I really want to go down to the tip of Argentina and Patagonia. Those are two places that I really want to go. I'm really interested in the whole ecosystems and how the birds relate to their whole ecosystems. And then I'm also incredibly interested in Los Angeles, urban wildlife. That's something I'm working on right now.
Maybe we need a LA mural project.
Fabulous.
Jennifer, this question's for you. The art run that you mentioned earlier, is that going to be an annual event, or is there another way that folks can get a guided trip around to see different murals?
Yes, we're actually in the planning stages for our next 5K run that we're hoping to make even bigger and better. We actually advertised that among both running groups and Audubon members and got a good number of people from both. But New York City Audubon runs monthly tours of the Mural Project. Interestingly, there are a lot of other tour guides in New York City that have added it to their tours. And you can also self-tour by just printing out a map or using the Google map that's available on our site.
Katherine, I'm glad you highlighted Zeiss as being a sponsor. Certainly there has to be, people supporting the artists to get to the locations to kind of make these connections. I also am sure that there are times where you can't say yes to a project or a trip. How do other artists get involved in making their art more meaningful for bird conservation?
I think starting from the ground up is always a good idea. And, you know, I did not start out by asking for corporate contributions to specific organizations. I didn't start out by asking money for me. I unfortunately have a very, very bad addiction to birding. And then I have academic and long history as a, you know, first as a sort of contemporary exhibiting artist, and then I went into birds for some unknown financial reason. So I would say the ability to weather through all kinds of financial circumstances and to do what you absolutely love, and then to work with people who are really, really excited about what they are doing is a great place to start. Learning how to pitch projects is important. You know, that's sort of the nuts and bolts of it, how to succinctly say, this is why this is important, and this is what it can do. Lots of research involved in everything we've ever done together. And I just think, you know, corporations are tough, but conservationists are not. So if you can find a way to liaison between them, you know, more power to you.
This is a little bit lighter question. You just said, Catherine, that you're a birder and resonate with that. Do you have a spark bird? And for those out there who don't know that terminology, it means a bird that got you into birding, one that sparked your interest or sparked your passion. And if you don't have a spark bird, you could just, you know, tell us one of your favorite birds.
I do, actually, and I'll try to make it short because it was a good story. But I was a birder when I was a kid because my dad is a birder. He's a neuroscientist, but he was also a birder. And so I used to bird with him. And then I was way too cool. I went into arts, contemporary art, music, punk rock, you name it. So I wasn't doing a lot of birding until I came back to it. I was in grad school to get an MFA in painting. I was not really thinking about birds, but I'd sort of developed an interest in botany, and I was doing field work in the summers. And I had to monitor in the most mosquito infested swamp in northern Michigan, in the UP of Michigan, that I've ever stood in. And while I was being a spotter for little radars on transects and standing there with mosquito netting wrapped around me, a winter wren walked across my foot. And I said, ooh, it looks like a mouse. And I was like, because I couldn't move. I wasn't supposed to move. So I was trying to see what this bird was, not scare it. And it crawled into a cave, and I was like, ooh, cave dweller. I haven't quite forgiven Europe for taking troglodytes back from us as the nominate. So our troglodytes is no longer the nominate. Troglodytes for the scientific name, but winter wren is my bird. Did it.
What a fitting bird for a birder, a little brown bird, a beautiful song. Of course.
Yeah, amazing.
Jennifer, you work full-time for National Audubon Society, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a birder, but do you have a bird, a favorite bird or a spark bird?
You know, I, as the editor of Audubon magazine in particular, I feel I should have a really solid answer to this question, but the truth is every time we do a story on a bird, I'm like sparked anew, and I'm like, no, that is the best bird that I've ever heard about. So they're birds that I love. I love piping plovers. They're so vulnerable and so like intrepid at the same time. I also love Arctic tern. I've been lucky enough to be have done reporting in both the Arctic and the Antarctic, and so I feel an affinity for that bird's travels as well.
This question's for you, Catherine. You find yourself on the sides of the cliff or a road that's recently built. What's your biggest travel tip for the birders out there who want to do a little more venturesome travel? Do you have any tricks of the trade?
I'll try to keep this brief too. So travel tips. Never put everything into the same bag that you don't want to lose. Number one. Distribute your items amongst things and back up everything. So that's my number one travel tip, because you're in these places, you don't know you're ever going to see this place in your life again. You know, I was amazed that I got to go back to Nagaland, but that first time, you know, it was such a rare opportunity. So that's one tip. If I'm traveling alone, for safety reasons, I leave my gas tank on empty in the parking lot so that if somebody steals my car, at least they didn't get a full tank of gas. That's tip number two. I have lots, but I'll cap it at that.
Our next question is about the type of medium that you use. Do you have one that you prefer, or a medium that, you know, that you're drawn to recently?
My lifelong love was making large oil paintings, and I had to quit that because I became allergic to the solvents and some of the stuff in the mediums. And I was a professor, I taught at the Rhode Island School of Design and had to quit. And then I went to watercolor, which I hated with a white hot passion. There are two things I hated: genre work and watercolors of birds. And I learned to love them over time. It's now my favorite medium, but I bounce back and forth. I work in ink, I work digitally, I work in watercolor. I like them all. I'm really poly interested in media. They're all amazing. Paper's great, digital's great. There's pros and cons of each. They're all tools.
This question's for Jennifer. You shared the photo of the mural that had the concrete hands and the bird song. Do you have any other murals that are more kind of 3D related?
That trying to think offhand, that mural is definitely a first for us. We're watching it, hopefully that the hands will survive New York City for some extended period of time. We only lost a few fingers so far. The mosaic, really, the artists bring a lot of different personal artistic styles to it. So it's everything from graffiti art to fine art, everything from art that's applied directly to the building to, you know, paintings that are created in studios and then installed later. So it's a wide array of styles, but really the mosaic and Jessica Mafia's more mixed media installation were the first kind of forays into more 3D territory. And I also want to add that Audubon has a very long history of using art to communicate around the spectacular diversity of birds and the urgency in helping protect them. And we feature a lot of different styles of art as well in Audubon magazine, and our art director, Christina Deckert, has been doing spearheading a spectacular series called Illustrated Aviary that uses a lot of different mediums also to look at birds through the perspective of different artists.
Well, everyone tuning in are just giving rave reviews in the chat, in the comment section. So I want to thank you both for being here tonight and giving us your time, your expertise, your tales of travel, as many of us have been sitting at home these days. It's always kind of fun to see the world through birds and conservation. And don't forget, folks, that we are fundraising for our own mural to be up in Midcoast, Maine, highlighting the seabird research that we do with the Seabird Institute and Hog Island Audubon Camp. So I will drop that link again. We will not have another Making Bird Connection series this season because we are going to be launching our summer camps. For those who are interested, we have day programs, week-long adult bird camps at Hog Island. We've been doing that for the past 80 years. And you can learn more at hogisland.audubon.org if you're interested in coming to see puffins and Arctic terns with us up in Maine. Otherwise, look forward to our relaunch of the Making Bird Connections lecture series, hopefully in the fall. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Katherine. Thanks everyone for tuning in. It's been a pleasure and look forward to seeing you all again soon.